Welcome everyone to our MCAT 101. We are presenting this by Ideas Student Society with our guest speaker today, Cameron Young, our VP of Operations, Susan Brossman, and our IDE advisor, Gabrielle Feldman, are going to be walking us through today what we need to know for our MCAT for those of you that are taking it, as they are both on their way to preparing for the MCAT. So Susan and Gabby, go ahead and take it away.
Hello. All right, so we're going to be starting off with, we'll be talking about how to prepare, so different resources. We'll talk about the ideal timeline and recommended courses. And at the end, we'll have Cameron Young, and feel free to come up with lots of questions to ask him. All right, Gabby.
Thanks. Okay, so here we have a bunch of free resources, and a lot of people don't really know about these, but it's important to know when you start doing your MCAT prep. So we have the Jack Weston Daily. So you can just go to jackweston.com and sign up, and there every day you will get a new daily passage that you can practice for free and see the solutions and everything. You also have Kaplan. So believe it or not, online you can find a lot of content review for Kaplan for free. And it's always like the year before. So we're in 2024. So they have like Kaplan content out there for content review that's on all subjects for the year 2023. So that's also really interesting. We have the Anki Index. So you should be utilizing these a lot. So with these, they have you can go on Reddit and you can find like the most famous ones that are the best decks for students to use. So it's like the Boris deck, um, the Jack Sparrow, yeah, Miles Down, and these types of things. And this is all free. If you just want to, for example, use it on your desktop. If you want the app, so you have it on your phone on the go, then you have to just pay a one-time fee of about $20. But for your desktop, it's totally free. Additionally, you have the AAMC. So, right, so the people who administer this test, you have the fee assistance. I highly recommend applying, even if you don't think you will get it. Okay, I'm living internationally and I did not think I would get this at all because I also didn't qualify for a lot of what was required to even apply for the fee assistance, but I still got it. And what does that mean? You get a whole bundle for free, you get practice exams for free, you get a discount off your test registration, and a discount off other things from AAMC. Additionally, you have the Psych Soc doc. This is the 300, 100 page that people tend to use. They say you can get by with this document without having to take anything else for Psych Soc for the MCAT. I heard the MCAT's got a bit difficult for the Psych Soc setting, but I would still like advise to maybe use this. You can get it off of Reddit. So yeah, we also have Reddit as well. It's also helpful. Any like podcasts, for example, you can look on Apple Podcasts and type in MCAT and they will give you free stuff daily. And podcasts are also free. And Khan Academy, right? That's your content review in addition to Kaplan. Like Khan Academy is all free. So this is amazing. They don't update it anymore, but they do make sure, like they partner with AAMC and make sure like that what is being displayed is, for example, appropriate for students. And maybe Susan, you want to talk about the last point on there?
Yeah, so ASU offers pre-health mentorship. You submit an application and they partner you with a medical student. So I had the opportunity to do that this spring, and it was really great. We just discussed a bunch of things about like MCAT, prepping for personal statements, just kind of what to expect about medical school in general. And actually, even though it's ending technically at the end of the semester, we're still going to keep in contact and kind of throughout the whole process of applying to med school and hopefully thereafter, because he's been a really great help. Gabby, back to you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So now the paid resources, the fun things. So not all of these are necessary, but it's highly recommended also if you want to do very well in the MCAT and say, for example, you take your diagnostic and you are not where you thought you would be or where you should be. So we have, again, Kaplan. So yeah, for Kaplan, right, if you want to use more of their services, for example, get their updated books for the year, and then also get any of their online resource banks, you do need to pay. I know some people end up paying over 900 for Kaplan books for the newest ones. Anking, like I said, the only thing you have to pay for that is if you want to use it on the go on your phone. I did this because I am someone I just know, like, I am always busy, I'm always on the go, and I like to just be able to do things right from my phone. So I invested just the $20 for it the one time, and then it updates with my browser version on my computer constantly. So it's not like it doesn't correlate together. They constantly update. Chad's MCAT prep. So this is something I found out a bit later um, from a resident doctor. This is extremely helpful. Chad, you know, he's one of the people working for ASU, and you might have already had him before for a couple of courses or noticed that for ASU, he gives a lot of free courses, but he has a specific MCAT prep. This is paid for, and I think it's around for everything, if you want all subjects, around 60 a month. And what he does is he basically, it's content review. So if you're in your content review stage, and he just goes through everything that you need to know. And everything that you don't need to know, he just doesn't cover. So for example, this is filtered out. So when you're thinking of taking content review from Khan Academy or Kaplan, it's not filtered out there. So they're just giving you everything. And with the Chad's MCAT prep, that's the main seller, right? He just focuses on what you need to know for the MCAT. So you're not wasting your time with anything, not getting stuck in details. We have Blueprint. This is also, you can get tutors from them, you can get a whole schedule from them. People can pay a lot of money, like thousands of dollars for this. And then you can also get their free exams. So they're just another outsource that you can pay if you want something to be scheduled for you. Or you can just buy their packs if you just wanted, for example, more practice exams to take. But they are on the more expensive side. UWorld, I have this. I invested in this. This is a question bank. This is to get you familiar with how the MCAT, how the questions are asked. I think it's like $300 for the 6 months. And then from them, if you say you want to have it, or if you want to have it longer, then you just pay a little bit less to just extend your subscription already. And it's just question packs. That's all it is. And it's also really important, right? Because unfortunately, the MCAT, from what I've heard from people and resident doctors, it's more about learning how to take a test than actually your actual knowledge most of the time. That's just how it is. Then we have Jack Weston. So was the JW on the other screen. So if you want more from Jack Weston other than the daily free CARS passages, so this is for your critical analysis reading passages, then you need to pay. And it's around $700 or more, but you get it until you get into med school. So there is no confined time like with UWorld, and these are just your question packs, which is a really important part of the MCAT, the reading and how to get through it quickly and pick out the most important things out of the passage. It's a lot harder than you would think. And then you have your MCAT self prep. So on here, you also have to pay. They're a bit cheaper. They're just mini courses. I paid for a few of them. And for example, they offer things like just like a short thing on amino acids, like your main like fundamental topics, or math, quick math. For example, if you're someone that's not bad at math, but it's just not your favorite subject and you need a refresher, right? Because you don't have a calculator, like you can go there and pay like $20 or something and get like their quick math course, which is nice, and then you always have access to it. Yeah, so those are those. I hand it back to Susan.
All right, so now we're going to go over an ideal timeline. And just to put this out there, not everyone's different. We all study differently. These are just some things that have worked well for many other students in the past, but doesn't necessarily mean it'll work well for you, or maybe it will work really well. So first off, you should take a diagnostic practice test. See how you do, see where you are, and don't get super upset by your initial score. Then you're going to want to review some of your knowledge areas. It's been recommended to not spend too much time on this. Like if you continually get questions wrong in that area, go back and then focus on that knowledge area. Here you're going to want to review the questions that you got wrong in your diagnostic test as well, and see what you did right and what you did wrong. Then you're going to want to begin taking practice questions. So like something from UWorld or a similar resource, and start with like 10 questions a day so you're not overwhelmed by the amount of content and the time it's going to take, and work yourself up to 40 questions a day. Each section on the MCAT is approximately 59 questions each. So you're kind of training for a marathon here. So you get yourself up to 40, and you're already in a really good place. You're going to want to take probably 4 more practice tests in this time, just to see how you're doing, make sure that you're having a better understanding of, like Gabby said, the MCAT is really learning how to take the test. So once you get up to, you've been doing a bunch of practice questions, you're getting really into a good place, you've taken 2 practice exams, and you're probably going to take some more, you want to start intermixing your sections. So you don't want to focus for a whole week on Chem and Phys and then start at Cars and then come back 4 weeks later and redo everything. You kind of want to, and that's up to you. Do you want to do it daily? Do you want to, if you want to do weekly or every couple of days, whatever is going to work best for you and the way you learn. Finally, you're going to take a final practice test. You're going to take a really big, deep breath and know that you've done an awful lot of work to get to this point. And by then, your score should be improving. It might not be the score that you want, but it should be much better than your diagnostic test. So through research and speaking with medical students, doctors, it seems that 6 months is a good compromise with the amount of time you should be spending for studying for the MCAT, because it's pretty much a big knowledge dump. It's a very knowledge based test, and the more time you spend on it, studying for it, the longer and longer you go, the more a chance you have of forgetting things that you started studying, 10 months ago, 12 months ago. I've heard you really don't want to be taking a whole year to study for this test. You really want to keep it as short to what works best for you. I know some of us have full-time jobs, we're in school. So really plan out how you want to do it. And some people, like Gabby and I were talking, she doesn't want to use a schedule because that might be more stressful. I like to have a skeleton outline myself personally of what I'm going to focus on, so I can kind of check things off as I go, but I'm not set on like this particular Thursday. I'm studying, like I'm going to do 4 Cars passages. So it's a little bit movable because life happens. But I know that I'm going to do some studying that day.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, so it's important, like you should have goals and some deadlines, but it is so easy to get overwhelmed with the amount of content online of how people are saying, for example, on Reddit or on YouTube, of how they study, how they got the 520, how they got this. Um, it is just, it can get very overwhelming. And then in the end, you made yourself like five different schedules. So I know some people that just didn't even make themselves a schedule. And I also do this because for me, that triggers me a bit more. But I do have long-term deadlines. For example, at the end of this month, I want to be starting my practice test, or at the end of 2 months, I want to be done with my content review. So things like this you should have. And I just wanted to add on like what Susan said about when you take the final practice test. Yes, it should be better than your diagnostic. If you're not like far away from your diagnostic or even lower, like then you really should be honest to yourself and you need to evaluate this. Like why? Then you need to like reevaluate your timeline and go back and see like, okay, maybe this way of studying is just not working. And that's okay. Everyone studies differently, but the important part about this is like just being honest with yourself so you're not wasting any time and any more money on resources.
Yeah, no, that's exactly, and that's a really good point because, yeah, maybe you set your MCAT test for April, but you take your final diagnostic test in whatever schedule that you've created or non-schedule that you've created for yourself and you didn't do as well. You can always move your test date. Like it's not set in stone. So just giving yourself a little leeway. Um, to like so maybe you're going to take it in early April originally, but now it's going to be early May, because you're going to go do some more studying before you actually take your test. um, and along with your timeline and setting up how you're going to study is you should think about where when you want to take your test, because you should have it's highly recommended that you have all pieces of your application when that application opens up for medical school so that you can put everything in all at once and click submit. Because that puts you in the front of the pack. And there's students that have gotten like they have 4.0 GPAs, they have perfect MCAT scores, great letters of rec, but they submit it later than everyone else. So plan plan your timeline accordingly when you plan to apply to medical school, um, and just take a deep breath and give yourself a little bit of space so that if you do need to change your date, you can.
Yeah, that's also super important. I think you should also look at, for example, thinking of where you are also in your personal life, because stuff happens, and maybe, for example, it's not the best time to study for the MCAT when you're moving or taking a new job somewhere. For example, this happened to me. So I just got a new job offer and I would be moving to a different country. So right now I am taking a break and I'm gonna reevaluate again just because like I'm having a major life change and it's stressful. And to push through and study through this sometimes also isn't is maybe not the best way for some people, that it could be much better your time utilized if you wait after until you've gone through something. So for everyone's personal circumstances, also try to think about that to the best of your abilities. Things can always come up, of course.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Okay, so recommended courses. Um, so these are just some courses that are recommended that you take before the MCAT. There have been a lot of students in the past that have taken the MCAT prior to taking some of these classes. A lot of them do then say it would have been great if I had it. Might have made some studying a little bit easier because you've already reviewed the concepts. So now when you're doing your knowledge review or just taking test questions, you're really just reviewing what you've already learned. So generally, you should take your Gen Chem 2 semesters, your Organic Chem 2 semesters, Biology 2 to 3 semesters, your Physics 2 semesters, Biochemistry recommended 1 to 2 semesters, your Psychology and Sociology classes, Statistics, and Anatomy and Physiology is recommended as well. Though I know on the pre-health track at ASU, Anatomy and Phys is not one of our required classes, but you can always speak with pre-health advising and they can help you with selecting your classes and prepping for the MCAT of what's going to help you the most. Gabby, you have anything?
No, no.
All right. All right, so now for our guest speaker, Cameron Young. Cameron is an Ohio native and a Florida resident. He's a current student physician at Nova Southeastern University and an Ohio State University alumni as of 2020. He is an ensign in the U.S. Navy and Health Profession Scholarship recipient. He's an avid lover of all things outdoors and chair of the Wilderness Medicine Club at KPCom. All right, Cameron, would you like to go ahead and speak?
Yep. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I figured I'd start by asking if anyone has any initial questions. And if not, I can give my experience taking the MCAT and some of the things that other resources that me or some of my classmates have found. So if anyone's got any questions, feel free to ask. All right. Well, so I took my MCAT back in 2021 and I did a 6-month track of studying, which is a bit of a longer one for most students from what I've experienced. Most students take 3 to 4 months. And some of the resources that are pretty heavily used are definitely like Anki and UWorld are probably the biggest two that I've heard everyone uses. Anki is like a great flashcard system. It helps hold you accountable because you can reflect on how hard or difficult the cards were. And it's on average, I'd say probably 100 to 200 cards a day is about what most people do to get through all of it in like a normal time frame. But starting out studying Anki and using whatever books or study material you initially get are major things that are important. I personally used a set of Kaplan books, and I think at the time I was doing about 3 chapters a day, just working through the basic material. And it's really important to get through all of that as fast as you can, but not to rush it, because you really need to have an understanding of this material. Taking your first diagnostic test can generally wait. I'd say if you're on a 6-month track, I would wait probably a month before when you start taking it, so that you have some kind of like the information under your belt going in, or maybe like some practice questions from the books you're working with. But the first diagnostic test is less important when it comes to like reflecting on what you do and don't know. It's very much just a test to see where you're at. And oftentimes, because you haven't been studying that long, the score is going to come out pretty low. It's not abnormal for people to go from their first test to their last test and jump 10, 15 points. But the first diagnostic test, I personally took advantage of Princeton Review has like a free diagnostic test you can do. That way I wasn't wasting any of the other tests that you can get through sources like AAMC that are going to be more realistic and more comparative to the actual MCAT. I will say my first diagnostic test, I scored in the 490s, which was not a great feeling. But by the end of like my 6 months of studying, I scored well up in I was scoring on the diagnostic tests up in like the 514, 515, and then on the real deal I scored a 513. So it's not, if you don't do well on your first one, don't feel bad. It's pretty easy to make a wild jump from first to last. I personally, when I was doing practice questions, I had two resources I really used a lot. And the first one being UWorld. I feel like that's a universal one that every person studying for the MCAT, they spend the money, they put like probably a couple hours a day just into UWorld questions, working on that, learning how to take the exam. UWorld is probably the most, I want to say, authentic or closely aligned with how the MCAT is going to show up question wise. I will say that like the cars section, where like the critical analytical reasoning skills, some of the UWorld like topics, vignettes can be a little bit more difficult than what you'll see on the actual cars section of the MCAT, but it also is pretty varied. Even within the like AMCAS practice exams, I know a lot of people might score really well on cars one week, but then the next week they'll absolutely bomb it. Cars in particular is one that everyone swings back and forth on, because the papers or the vignettes and the different like papers they give you can be really wild and out of nowhere. I remember getting one that was on the music history comparing Beethoven to modern rap. And if you don't really find that interesting or have no background in that, it can be difficult to score well on those portions, because it's not something you're gonna comprehend or comprehend as well as other portions. Outside of the cars section, I know a lot of people, including myself, can sometimes struggle with Psych Soc. Psych Soc is the largest portion of the MCAT studying that you'll do. There are 2 books just for that alone, and they are mostly looking at studies on studies, and taking the MCAT itself, Psych Soc does not feel as much as talking about like the psychology and sociology sometimes as it is, can you look at this graph? Can you tell me what the statistics on this graph are indicating, and how might that be related to psychology and sociology? It's kind of not, it's kind of counterintuitive at times. I know a lot of my classmates, that was their biggest portion when they were going through diagnostics and practice exams. It would swing back and forth between, they would score well on it one week, and then the next week when they were taking their taking their next practice, they would have an absolute horrible time with Psych Soc, and it would just be their worst score. So be aware that like Psych Soc takes a lot of time. I know when I did the Anki cards for it, I used the Miles Down set, and you could do, I think, close to like 200 cards a day from like Psych Soc, and like in 6 months, I don't know if I got every card that was in Psych and Soc done. I think I still had like 100 new cards I needed to go through. So it's a dense, very it's got a lot of information in it. It's stuffed kind of to the brim. When it came to like time schedule, when I was working on a 6-month schedule, I took the first 3 months and just did kind of content review. I didn't really touch any diagnostics, because you don't want to take too many diagnostic exams, because you can start to like not burn out on them, but kind of like burn out. You look at the same thing over and over, and it can be more mentally taxing than it is helpful. I know in total, I took, um, I want to say 7 diagnostic exams over 6 months, and I did the one initial, and then starting at the 3 month period, I did one every 2 weeks for a month and a half, and then, or for 2 months, and then the last couple weeks leading up, I was doing an exam a week until the last week. I took one the Saturday before I went and took my real MCAT. And then that entire week after I took my last diagnostic, I kind of just went through Anki. I didn't do U World questions because you really want to come in with a fresh mind. Um, so part of some things that like people make the mistake of doing is the day before they take their MCAT, they'll go through and do hundreds of questions or take a full like diagnostic exam the day before. And diagnostic exams and all of those questions are mentally draining. So if you go through and do all that the day before, like some people choose to do, you end up just kind of tired and almost like some people say they have like brain fog going into the actual MCAT the next day. And that's not good for anyone because if you're not thinking clearly or you're tired going into it, you very much aren't going to test well. And part of the MCAT, sadly, is you have to be good at taking tests and be prepared to take a really long test. When I took my exam the day of, during the exam itself, they give you headphones and everything to like block out noise. But even then, like you're grossly aware of everything that's going on around you. One person in my group actually had a panic attack inside of the room, and he had to leave, which is extremely distracting outside of or to anyone else who's in the room because you have to continue to take it while they're trying to escort someone who's having an anxiety attack out of the room. And I want to say, or I would like to say that that's not uncommon, but talking to some of my classmates, about 6 or 7 of us have had similar experiences where while we're in the middle of taking the exam, someone in the room that we're testing alongside has a panic attack or has an anxiety attack, or one of my classmates even said someone vomited on the computer that they were taking the test on. So it's a nerve-wracking exam, and you don't want to come in with any kind of like tiredness, mental drain, any kind of brain fog that might make you anxious even more than you already are going to be because it's a big exam. But just besides that, it is an anxious time. And it's good that you're anxious for it because it helps keep you on your toes during the exam. But you don't want to let that anxiety get too bad. One of the things that some people make the mistake of doing is studying every day, all day, for like 3 months straight. And they never relax at all. So they're constantly anxious. And even though the MCAT's a big exam that's going to have a big impact on you, don't let it control your entire life. It's a big exam, but take some time, and I'd say probably take 2 days out of the week and don't study at all. Just go out and enjoy yourself, or like use those days to get some work done, errands, because the MCAT you should probably be studying, I want to say 4 hours a day at minimum. When I studied, I did 3 hours a day for 6 months, and that was on top of working in 2 full-time jobs in a hospital and a COVID testing center. So I was working 6 days a week on top of studying, and it was a very taxing time while I did. to the point where I left one of the jobs and started working just 3 days a week doing 12s in order to like give myself study time and help give myself more breaks, because it was anxiety inducing, it was mentally draining and physically draining. But yeah, other tips and tricks, I would personally say investing in a large number of resources is kind of not the go-to. Uh, I would pick one, maybe two that you find really helps you and dive into that pretty hard. Um, I know Anki was big for me in UWorld. The only other resource I really used outside of like AAMC resources were the Kaplan books, and I used it's a book series called Exam Crackers. It is a bunch of books of just vignettes and prompts that they give you, and each prompt may have 5 or 6 questions attached to it, really similarly to how the MCAT's testing actually goes. And it's kind of on the more expensive side for resources. I think the books themselves cost, I think I paid $250 for it, but it was one of the best resources out there. And of the people that I know that have used it, they are all the people that generally score higher on exams than on the MCAT than some of the other people who used other resources like Princeton Review, or like there was another big one that I can't remember. I think it's like Mastering the MCAT, but yeah, I also, if you find yourself falling behind or really struggling, I know many people who absolutely refused to go for a tutor because they could do it themselves, or they wouldn't pay, or they couldn't like bring themselves to pay the money for a tutor. But if you need one of the tutoring services for the MCAT, use the tutoring services. They are there to help build your MCAT taking skills. They are often doing it because like they have seen people go through it. I had a friend who paid, I think it was $1,000 for a tutoring service, and between the first time he took the MCAT and the second time, it brought his score up a whole, I want to say 10 points. So if you need a tutor, use a tutor. They are helpful. They can give you hints and tricks that might help you more on an individual level that you won't be able to find other places. Other decent resources, if you're just not understanding a topic, I used YouTube on so many occasions. There are plenty of videos out there for med students, for pre-med students. I know Ninja Nerd is one that even in med school, everyone continues to use because it's a great resource. It gives you all of the information you need to know, both for the MCAT and for like boards later on when you do become a physician. But it's just another free resource there that can be accessed by anyone and is super helpful. I think that's probably all the hints and tricks I probably had. Advice I would probably give: don't be discouraged if your score isn't where you want it to be after taking the exam. I know some people get up in arms and feel bad if they don't do like a perfect score. All med students are type A personalities. We all want to get that like 515 or above, but statistically, that's only the top like 20 or only the top 15% of students get up there. I know many of my classmates who have gotten into med school with below the 50th percentile. I have like 4 classmates that got in and they were in the 490s. Your score is just another metric, and schools are even moving towards looking at it less progressively over time and looking at things that you're involved in more. So if you don't score well, don't panic, don't let it bring you down or discourage you from applying. It's just a score. And I think that's probably all I have. If anyone has any questions now, I'll feel free to answer.
Okay. All right. Thank you everyone for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come and listen. And Cameron, we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy study schedule, especially at this time of year in medical school, to speak with us about the MCAT.
Guys, have any questions or anything, please feel free to email us if you are watching this back on our YouTube. And don't forget to check us out at our website, ideas.org. We will be posting this there as well as on our YouTube channel in the next few days. But we want to thank you for coming, and we want to thank you for watching our MCAT 101.